Have you always wanted to have a go at geometric peyote stitch? I'm here to show you how to create these fun little beaded pyramids using Delica beads. Hi, I'm Chloe Menage and Jill Wiseman has invited me to share another colourful beading project with you. These little pyramids work up fairly quickly and make excellent beaded beads. I've strung them on beading wire for summery necklaces. For this pattern you're going to need Delica beads in 5 colours, plus 2mm and 6mm glass pearls, beading wire and some findings to finish. Let's look a bit more closely. So these pyramid beaded beads are fantastic. They're bright and summery and just perfect for this time of year. They're really light to wear and you can string them any way you please. I've chosen to string them just with some pearls and I'll show you later how I went about finishing off the necklace. But let's get started with actually beading the triangles. Now each of these beaded beads is made up with 4 triangles and I've done mine each in a different colour, and you'll find the chart for those over in the pattern download, and I give you suggestions of which colours to use where for this colourway, but really it's up to you. You can really have fun with playing with the different colour combinations and deciding where you want to put them. You might want to choose to make each triangle the same, and that would also look really cool. So let me show you how we go about building up these triangles. So to start off with, we're using 5 different colours of Miyuki size 11 Delica beads. You could of course use larger beads. If you were to use the 10s or even the 8s, then you'd make much bigger triangles, which would give a really fun statement effect. But for the purposes of this, we're using size 11 beads, and I've got 5 different colours. You can use more or fewer colours. I think 5 gives a nice effect. And you can also get all of these beads in Jill Wiseman's Delica bead sets as well, which you'll find over on the website. So to start off with, you're going to choose one of the colours and you're going to pick up 3 of those beads and thread them on your needle. Push them down, leaving a short tail thread. We don't need a big tail thread, and we're just going to be weaving that in later, so it's just something to hold on to. And it's worth mentioning at this point that with your beading thread, if you're using 1G or Miyuki or KO thread, you're going to need to stretch and wax that thread really well to help with your tension. It is possible to use fireline for this project, but I do recommend using one of the more supple beading threads if you're new to geometric beadwork. So I'm just going to pass through all of those beads again to join them into a ring. And I'm just going to go through the first couple of beads just to get away from my tail thread. And you can see how I'm gripping that tail thread between my fingers to anchor that thread. So now we're going to pick up 2 beads in a new colour. And these are going to be our corners. So normally with peyote we skip a bead, but with this it's a little bit more like herringbone, so we're going to go directly into the next bead around, and this is what creates our increases. And you can see how those 2 beads sit really nicely between the previous 2. I'm going to rotate that slightly, pick up 2 more and go into that next bead around. And you're going to just repeat that one more time, and you're adding 6 beads for this first round. When we get to this last bead, we're going to go through the last bead, and then stepping up, we're going to pass through that first bead of the next round, the one that we just added at the beginning there, but just the first one. Nudge those into position and you'll see that you're left with a nice little shape that's starting to come together. So now we're going to pick up 2 more beads, and for this I've, to help with the colour bands, to make them nice and defined, apart from for the first row, I've suggested we add 2 rounds of each colour, and that creates quite nice thick bands of colour. So I'm going to stick with this pink here and pick up another 2. I'm going to go directly into that next bead in the pair. Nudge those and those on there. You can see how it looks a little bit like herringbone in the corners here if you've done that before and you're familiar with it. And now we've got that regular peyote space that we're used to seeing. So we're going to pick up 1 and go through that next bead in the row. So it's handy having the different colours here because it really helps you see where you need to work into. So now we're going to pick up 2 in this corner again. Pop those into position and then again we've got that space, and this is all it is. We're going to just keep going around, adding one in the spaces and picking up two at the corners. And as each row goes on, you're going to have more spaces along those edges to add beads into. So this is our final one. I'm going to go into that next bead, and then I'm going to step straight up through that first bead that we added in the beginning of the round. And now we can choose a different colour, and you'll see in the PDF download, which you can get from the website, that I've suggested some charts with the colour placements, and that really helps with keeping the colours varied throughout the triangles, so you've got different ones in different positions all the way around. However, you could create each of your triangles exactly the same. You could instead have for example, all of them with the same colour stripes, or just have two colour stripes of each. So two triangles the same. We're going to be making 4 of these triangles in total. So you can really have a play with your colours and really experiment with how they look. So you can see with this, I'm adding 2 in each corner, and then I've got space to add 2 single beads along the edges. And you're just going to be weaving around. So I'm going to, for the greens, I would add 2 rows of green, and then I would add 2 more rows after that. And you're going to have 7 in total, and I'll just show you how we count our rows. So you've got your central section there, so that's row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you've got 7 rows in total, 2 of each colour apart from that central one. So you're going to keep going until you've done 4 triangles, and each of them will be exactly the same. So I'm going to carry on beading, and I'll let you catch up with me, and we'll meet back together in a minute when we've got our 4 triangles created. So once you've got your 4 triangles, I recommend finishing off the threads on all of them, because that will make your life a lot easier, apart from on the 4th triangle. And on this one, we're going to add a row of single size 11 Delicas all the way around. And we're just going to do that by picking up 1 in the corner and then working our way down this side to add just 1 in each of these spaces. And this is going to enable us to zip our triangle to the other ones. And you'll see, I'll show you once we've done this row, how that then allows it to fit to and the triangle next door to it, and we can start to build up that pyramid shape. Now you do need to keep a nice tight tension on your triangles as you work. So if you're somebody who struggles with a floppier tension or a looser tension, I do recommend waxing your thread really well before you start. Fireline can also obviously help with a stiffer tension. And for little pieces of geometric work like this, you may find that you don't have any problems using the fireline. Sometimes on larger pieces, it can be hard to get that tension with the fireline. But I do recommend waxing your thread really well and just keeping a firm tension as you work. So you can see here how, now that we've created these sticky outy ones here, that your second triangle is going to zip really nicely together with those. So we'll just carry on adding these, and then I'll show you how we're going to zip them all together. So we're going to keep going all the way around, adding 1 in the corners. And when you've done that, your triangle is going to look a little bit like this one. So this is my other colourway, this is the sunset colourway. And all of these materials are available from JillWisemanDesigns.com, and you'll find there are curated Delica sets in her collection, and these 2 colourways were curated by me. These are, this is the fruity summer fruits one and the tropical sunset one, and they make such great combinations for these. So I've left my working thread attached on this triangle, and I've added a bead in each corner and along the edge, but I finish off my threads on all of my others. And if you don't have a long working thread, that's not a problem. You're just going to weave in a new thread and make sure it's secure. So I'm coming out of this first bead after a corner, and I'm going to take my second triangle, and we are just zipping. So I'm going to line that up and find the corresponding bead that it sits into. So if you're not sure, then find the corner, and it's the bead after that. So can you see there, that one fits nicely into there, they slot together. So I'm going to go through that one and then into the next orange bead on this side. And I've decided for my triangles I've used the same edge bead all the way around, and that made things a little bit easier for me. So I've gone with an orange bead for all of these, and for the other ones I used the kumquat colourway, but there's nothing stopping you from using a mixture of colours, but for me I found it easier because I could see which beads I need to be working into, and I tried to avoid using that colour on the edges of my triangles too. So you can see I'm just zigzagging backwards and forwards to bring that together, and you can keep it kind of loose if you need to, and then pull it together afterwards. So I'm kind of doing that, keeping it a little bit loose at the moment for this one. And just till I get to the edge, and then when I get to that corner I'm going to go into that edge bead here and then straight into my corner bead. And now I'm going to pick up a new triangle, and I'm basically working around. So this triangle that I've added the row of edge beads to, I'm going to work around that to attach my other 3 triangles to this one first, before I then start zipping up the edges of the other ones. So I'm coming out of the corner, I'm going to go into that top bead on the edge there, and then start zipping up again on this side. So once you've finished zipping all 4 of your triangles together, so I've got my base triangle with the 3 coming off it, I'm going to work up to this side here, and I'm going to now begin creating a row of orange ones off of this one. Now typically I've actually got 2 colours the same there, so it's going to be a little bit harder to see. So I've picked up one in that corner, I'm going to go through and add one in each of these spaces. And then when I get to the top here, what I'm going to do is fold these together, line up the beads, and I'm going to go over and down into that top bead on the other end, and then start zipping these edges together. And you should see now that you've added the extra row that they all line up nicely and slot together. Keep this nice and firm. If your triangles are a little bit floppy at this point, don't worry. It is possible to stuff them if you need to, and I'll talk you through all of that in a minute. So I'm zipping that up. And when I get to the bottom here, you can see that you need a point bead on that one, and you can add those in as you go. It does make it a little bit easier. So I've just picked up one, I'm going to go into that bead, and then can you see how this is flapping open slightly? So I'm going to just go up to secure that, and then what I'm going to do is just, while I'm here, pass through those 3 edge beads, the point beads, to join those together, and that just adds a little extra bit of security. So now you can see that we've just got this one open triangle on this end. So what I'm now going to do is weave along up here, and I'm going to add a row of the orange beads along here and along here, and then zipping this together. And you want to add any point beads in as you go. So if you can see that there's places that are missing point beads, so we're going to add a point bead in there, weave along, add a point bead, weave along, add a point bead, and then as you zip in, you can go in and add any missing point beads on these on this side, because this side will also need a point bead. So let me show you how that looks. So I'm coming out here, I'm going to add a point bead in between that edge, and then I'm going to work down and add point beads all along these purple edges. And if you run out of thread at any point, it's very easy to just quickly add in a new thread. So when you get to this corner, don't forget to add your point bead on, and then we can begin zipping these sides together. If your bead is feeling really squishy, like this much is okay, that looks fine, and you'll be surprised how once you've got it zipped together, quite how firm it suddenly becomes. But if it's really squishy and you're not happy with it, then you can actually add a little bit of stuffing inside here. I'd recommend something like the kind of cushion type filling, rather than something more solid like a shrink wrap or something like that. And that's because, don't forget, we do need to thread through these later on. All of these are hollow and they're threaded on to beading wire, so you do need to bear that in mind when you're filling out your beads. So if you are going to stuff them, just put a small amount in and try and leave a bit of a hole by poking an awl through, so that you've got a space to pass through later. But ideally we want to avoid stuffing if we can. So then you're going to just weave through and join up your final side. So we want to make sure we're adding any missing point beads in. So just weave around until you are in position to be able to pop those in, and then you can just carry on zipping up as normal. So you can see there how I'm weaving around that corner and picking up those point beads that we're missing, and that gets me perfectly in position to then work my way back down the other side for that final zipped row of sides together there, the final one. And that's my final point bead that needs to be added. And then I can just make sure I've joined up all of my corners. So I'm going to just weave around, so you can see how I just step across when I get to that edge, and just weave around all of those, and then you can work your thread in until it feels secure and trim all your threads off, and make sure you've got any of those little end threads off as well. So there we go. There's my first beaded triangle, and you can see how it's really nice and it feels good between your fingers as well. It's quite a nice tactile necklace to play with. So to thread on your beaded beads, you're going to be finding that hole in the centre and threading through that to come out the tip bead between those 3 beads at the top on the opposite side. Now they should all be joined by thread actually, there's a sneaky one that's been missed there, but ideally you want them all to have been joined up to keep it nice and secure. So it's up to you whether you have all of your triangles coming out and going in the same face of triangle. So obviously you've got 4 different triangles possibly, unless you've kind of gone and done your own thing, but as for the instructions you've got 4 different triangles, so you could choose the same triangle each time to go through, or you could keep it random and mix them up. I made 3 triangles. You could have as many triangles as you like, pyramids, sorry, 3 pyramids. You could have lots of different pyramid beaded beads if you wish, and what I did was I interspersed them with 6mm beads and threaded on 6mm followed by 4mm beads until I had a necklace that fit me. I'm using a flexible beading wire. You could use something like Soft Flex, which is a great choice, nice and flexible. And I've got a big selection of pearls, and I'm also using wire guardians, which are also sometimes called thread guards, and crimp tubes. So what I recommend doing is starting in the centre, and then you can get an idea of how long your necklace needs to be and how many you need to add on each side. So I'm going to start with my triangle. I'm going to pick up 1, and I've got a bent bit of wire on the end there. Let's try the other end. So I'm going to thread through that centre as I said, and out the opposite side, and thread on a pearl. and then another one. So once your necklace is to the desired length, we are going to finish it off, and I'm going to offer you 2 different suggestions for this. The first one is to use these cable thimbles, and they're also called wire guardians, and I'm just going to finish it with a trigger clasp, but you could do any clasp of your choice, and you're going to need some crimps. So to start off with, you're going to thread on your crimp bead, and then your wire guardian, thread around and back through the other side. Now if you are using a toggle clasp, you might need to add your clasp at this point. I'm going to attach mine with a jumping, so I don't need to worry about that. So we're going to go thread back through the crimp, and if you can do it in one move, but you might need to do it in 2, we're going to just thread through that last bead. Sometimes it's a little bit fiddly just to get through if the coatings get in the way. You can clean them out with an awl as you go, but generally it's not too bad. So we're just going to pass straight back through the last, and maybe the second one if you can get through that, but just one is okay as well. Pull that nice and snug, and then we're going to crush that crimp. So you want it nice and close to the wire guardian. You may want to just squeeze the wire guardian down slightly just to kind of make sure it's tapered in towards the crimp, and then we're going to crush that crimp nice and snug. Now I do like to turn them over and give them a squish from the other side just to be safe. Then you can snug your pearl up and trim that wire. Make sure you're trimming off the tail thread and not your rubber wire. Speaking from experience there. You're going to snug all those up. Make sure that little piece of tail of wire is hidden in your beads. And then we'll do the same on the other end. So when you come to do the second end, you're going to cut that wire off the spool if you haven't already, but do make sure you give yourself enough to work with. It's important to have not too short a length, so while we don't want any wastage, we do want to make sure that we've got enough to work with to not make it difficult for ourselves. So you're going to pop that crimp back on and your wire guard and go back around. And getting the tension here can be the tricky bit. It's worth spending a little bit of time doing this. So go back through the crimp and through your last bead. Sometimes it's easier to just go through the crimp first and then get that right, and then you can go through that pearl. And you can see why it's important to have a decent amount of wire to play with, because it can be a fiddle otherwise. And remember, you want that tension to be just right on your necklace. You don't want it too tight, or you don't want wire showing. If it's too tight, it's not going to be flexible and supple, and you're going to end up with breakages as well. So taking the time to do this bit right is important. So I'm going to pass back through that second bead. Make sure your tension is correct. So one thing to be aware of is you need the crimp nice and close to the wire guard. Otherwise what you're going to find is that piece of wire, the wire guardian moves up and down and you end up with wire showing. So you want that crimp nice and snug to that wire guard, and then you can give that a crimp and trim your excess wire off, and then it's ready. All you need to then do is add your clasp. You can tuck that little piece of wire into the other beads as well, just to keep it nice and secure. So we're going to add our clasp. I'm just using a jump ring and a trigger clasp, and you can add then a jump ring to the other end. So folding that in. And just twisting that jump ring back closed again, and then your necklace is ready to wear. So another option is you can just use calottes or necklace ends, and you just thread the crimp on, squeeze that closed nice and firmly. I always like to give them a squish from each side just to make sure. Then you can trim the thread and close the calotte down over it. And then you're ready to attach that to your clasp. And again with the other side, just making sure that you've not pulled everything too tight. You want it snug, but not so tight that there's a tension there that's going to cause a breakage. And you can pop your crimp tube on. And be very careful not to drop everything here because that would be really sad. Pull that nice and snug. So again, making sure you've got that flexibility so that it's moving without losing, without it being too tight, so that you lose that kind of natural movement of the necklace. And give that one a squeeze as well. Nice and secure. Once you've got it mostly squeezed, then you can turn it around and try and give it a squeeze from the other side just to make sure it's fully secure. And then again, you can trim this end down and fold that necklace end closed over it, and then you're ready to add your clasp of choice to the end. So there we have it. That is how you make your fruity pyramids beaded beads and how you turn them into a beautiful necklace ready for summer. If you've loved this video, then make sure you subscribe for more great tutorials from Jill Wiseman Designs, and check out all of the supplies that you need to make this project over on the Jill Wiseman Designs website. Happy beading!